My name is Dr. Navneet and I'm going to be presenting a case which came to the emergency department. So the name of a 75-year-old female who works as a housewife hailing from Perambaur came with chief complaints of constipation since 4 days and decreased response since 1 day.
Okay. So before going to the case, you should know actually what are the causes for constipation in an elderly individual. What are the common causes of constipation?
In an elderly individual, the patient might take several drugs such as antidepressants, calcium channel blockers, which might precipitate constipation.
What are common causes? No, it is water intake, less water intake, less fiber intake. These are the two important causes for constipation. Then like you told, drugs which is taken by the patient. Now, hypothyroidism. Last is malignancy. Malignancy will present with altered bowel habits and abdominal pain, anemia, all these things. Constipation can be there, but that will be more painful constipation.
Yes. Hypothyroidism, then electrolyte imbalance such as hypokalemia can also precipitate constipation. Then organic causes could be like systemic sclerosis. Can also.
So when you see such cases, this should come to your mind. Otherwise, you may miss. You will do all type of investigation, but you will never ask whether the patient is taking adequate water or not.
Yes. The history of presenting complaints. The patient was apparently asymptomatic 4 days ago when she started difficulty in passing stools, and decreased sensorium was also complained by the bystander since 2 days. The patient is a known case of chronic liver disease, child C, and also rheumatoid arthritis, and also the patient has bilateral varicose veins. The patient was initially admitted in a local hospital 2 days ago for constipation and generalized tiredness. She was given enema and she passed stools. She also complained of decreased sleep. There was no history of fever, headache, nausea or vomiting. There was no history of abdominal pain, bleeding per rectum. There was no history of trauma as well. There was no history of high colored urine, clay colored stools or pruritus. There was no hematemesis and melena as well. There was no history of any other drug intake as well. The past history of the patient, the medical history, the patient is a known case of type 2 diabetes mellitus and systemic hypertension, chronic liver disease and rheumatoid arthritis. The significant surgical...
Is there any relationship between the rheumatoid arthritis to chronic liver disease?
Rheumatoid arthritis is a pro-inflammatory state.
Rheumatoid arthritis itself, patient can have liver disease. Involvement of liver is known.
Yes.
Other than that, this patient may be on long-term drugs like methotrexate. That can produce liver disease. Commonly present with lung involvement, but even liver can be involved. So we should be very careful. Drug history should be taken properly, whether she has taken in the past. Cryptogenic liver disease is known in this type of rheumatic diseases. That also can be there. Other cause also we will find out.
Yes, sir. The significant surgical history would be the patient went sclerotherapy 6 months ago for bilateral varicose veins, and total knee replacement was also done 2 years ago. The family history.
So she might have had pain, she might have taken a lot of painkillers for this bilateral knee pain. All these things can induce liver disease.
The family history, the patient's sister is a chronic liver disease patient. The personal history of the patient, the patient complained of altered sleep, reduced to 3 to 4 hours per day. She had normal diet and appetite. She was not habituated to smoking and alcohol, and there was normal bladder and bowel movements. The general examination of the patient was conscious and cooperative, but she was drowsy. She was oriented to time, place and person as well. She was moderately built and nourished, and pallor was absent. Icterus, there was mild icterus present. Clubbing, she showed grade 1 clubbing or loss of anicodermal angle. Cyanosis was absent, lymphadenopathy was absent, and edema was also absent, which is a significant case in the case of a chronic liver disease. In the head-to-toe examination, pallor was present, icterus was present, asterixis was present, which was hepatic encephalopathy grade 2. And there was grade 1 clubbing, there was no alopecia, there was no parotidomegaly, there was no spider telangiectasia, there was no leukonechia, there was no palmar erythema, there was no Dupuytren's contracture, and also there was no evidence of breast atrophy. The vitals of the patient, the BP was 130/80 millimeters of mercury in lying down positions from left upper limb using an adult cuff. The pulse rate was 80 per minute, the rhythm was regular, the volume was normal, the character was normal, the condition of vessel wall was also normal. There was no radiofemoral or radioradial delay. Other peripheral pulsations were bilaterally palpable. The respiratory rate was 18 per minute and the type was abdominothoracic.
Okay.
The temperature of the patient was afebrile. So examination of the GI system proper.
So when you have a patient like this, what is the differential diagnosis in your mind?
And the patient presented with constipation and decreased sensorium. Okay. So the DDs of constipation would be hypothyroidism, electrolyte disturbances, decreased water intake. Decreased sensorium would be hypoglycemia. Again electrolyte imbalance. Or
most important cause for altered behavior in chronic liver disease is constipation. Why constipation produces altered behavior?
Because constipation leads to retention of ammonia.
Constipation leads to retention of bacteria. Which producing ammonia. Ammonia will be absorbed from the intestine. That produces hepatic encephalopathy or aggravates the hepatic encephalopathy. So that should be your aim. Should be to relieve the constipation. What is the important cause? You have to find out. You have to relieve it.
Yes.
Okay. So here constipation may be the important reason. We have to correct it.
Yes. Sir. And the DDs of altered sensorium is mainly hypoglycemia.
Electrolyte imbalance. Which electrolyte imbalance?
Hypokalemia basically.
Hypokalemia.
Okay. Hyponatremia can also cause.
Can also present. Okay.
The examination of GI system proper. The oral cavity, the lips, tongue, the gingiva, the mucosa, the tonsils, palate, and the oropharynx was normal.
Okay.
On inspection, the shape of abdomen was distended. There was no visible peristalsis. Movements.
What are the cause for distended abdomen?
Distended abdomen, ascites.
Ascites. 5 F's.
Fetus, fluid, flatus, fat.
Full bladder.
Okay.
Yes. So these things you should never forget. Okay. It's all basic things. Yes. Okay. Here we know that it is due to ascites, but other causes.
Yes. Okay. The umbilicus was midline and inverted. There was no swellings, scars, sinuses or dilated veins. There was no divarication of the recti. There was no visible pulsation or peristalsis. On palpation, the abdomen was soft. There was no tenderness or local rise of temperature. There was no guarding or rigidity. There was no swelling or pulsations as well. On the liver, examination of the liver, it showed enlarged size. It showed a smooth surface. It had regular margins and it was palpable 4 centimeters below the costal margins. There was no splenomegaly and there was no renal angle tenderness as well. On percussion, the upper border of liver was percussed in the 5th intercostal space. There was shifting dullness was present and there was no fluid thrill. Trop space was also resonant. On auscultation, bowel sounds were heard equally in all quadrants and there was no arterial bruit or venous hum. In the external,
how do you examine? What position you will examine for all these things? Abdomen. What should be the position of the patient?
Lying supine position.
You want to see the abdomen, patient has to stand because all the blood vessels will be, engorgement of vessels will be seen on the standing position. Other all position you can make the patient lie down. Some physicians prefer to bend the hip joint. Yes. Normally we can do without bending the hip joint itself because many patients in ER will be completely unconscious, so we will not ask them to bend the hip joint.
Yes.
We can even examine on the straight position.
Okay. The examination of the central nervous system, the higher mental functions.
Okay.
The Glasgow Coma scale was E4, V3 and M5.
So what is the score?
Which total score comes up to 12 out of 15.
Okay. So that is low.
Low.
Okay. Why this GCS is very important?
Because encephalopathy is
not because of encephalopathy. We know that encephalopathy is there. This is mainly for tracking the patient. You are admitting a patient. Okay, you score the GCS in 12. Next time she is coming after half an hour or 1 hour she is coming. Then she has to monitor the patient. There is no other monitoring. You have written that unconsciousness, but otherwise you are writing the GCS score. When she come, it is 10. Then she will understand the patient is deteriorating.
Yes.
That is the importance of GCS scoring.
Yes.
Okay.
Examination of the central nervous system. The patient was right-handed. The patient was conscious and cooperative, but showed decreased consciousness. That means the responses were slow.
Okay.
The patient was oriented to time, place, and person. Speech and language is normal, and there was no delusion and hallucinations. Examination of the cranial nerves. The olfactory nerve was normal. While assessing the optic nerve, the visual acuity, visual field and color vision was normal. Examination of the third, fourth, and sixth cranial nerve. The extraocular movements of the eye was normal. Pupils were normal. Direct and indirect light reflex was normal. Accommodation reflex was also normal. There was no diplopia, squint, or ptosis. Examination of the trigeminal nerve. Sensory supply of the trigeminal nerve, that is pain, touch, and temperature, were normal. Motor supply, muscles of mastication, was also normal. The reflexes of trigeminal nerve, that is the corneal, conjunctival, as well as the jaw jerk reflex, was also normal. Examination of the facial nerve, there was wrinkling of forehead was normal, puffing of cheeks, nasolabial folds were there, eye closure was normal, and deviation of angle of mouth was not there, and taste on the anterior 1/3 of the tongue, which shows the chorda tympani, was also normal. Assessment of the vestibulocochlear nerve, the Rennes and Weber's tests were done and was found to be normal. And examination of the 9th and 10th, that is the glossopharyngeal and the vagus, the uvula palate was central and symmetrical, there was no drooling of saliva, the gag reflex was normal, and nasal twangs were absent.
Okay. In emergency room, which is the most important cranial nerve for an emergency doctor or somebody working in emergency room?
Vagus.
All these things are important. Which is most important?
9th.
It is 9th and 10th, because somebody is having altered behavior. 9th and 10th cranial nerve is not working properly. There is a high chance of airway obstruction, aspiration, all these things. In that type of cases, immediately put a Ryle's tube.
Yes.
Don't wait for anything. Okay.
Yes. The spine laxary nerve, the trapezius as well as the sternocleidomastoid was also normal. The hypoglossal nerve, the power and tone of tongue was normal, and there was no wasting of fasciculation of the tongue. The motor system examination, the bulk of all the muscles were normal, tone was normal, and the power could not be tested as the patient was drowsy.
Okay.
The reflexes, superficial reflexes, abdominal, cremasteric, and plantar reflexes were normal. Deep reflexes, the biceps, triceps, supinator, knee jerk reflex, and ankle jerk reflex was also normal. The sensory system examination was also normal, sir. Cerebellar signs were also...
If suppose this like sensory you told normal, but what you should focus in sensory system? There are some focus in every type of case.
Yes.
It's a neurological case, you will examine different type of sensation, but in a CLD patient, what sensations can be absent? That is very important, especially patient who is having diabetes, patient is having alcoholism, all these things. What is the type of sensory loss they all develop? It is glove and stockings type of peripheral neuropathy. So you have to always examine for the vibration sense, because that is a large fiber neuropathy. Vibration sense will be first absent. Okay. So when you are examining this type of cases, really if you want to know the vibration sense, you have to, really want to know the sensations of this patient, vibration should be examined.
CLD patient?
All patients, like if this patient is having altered behavior, it is not possible. Other type of patient who is fully cooperating, vibration sense is the first one to disappear. Okay. In a peripheral neuropathy type sensory loss. Okay. That is a common sensory loss in all these patients. Okay.
The cerebellar signs were also normal. There was no signs of meningeal irritation as well. Respiratory system was normal.
What do you want to focus in the respiratory system?
We can assess if there is any associated pleural effusion.
So that is very important. Look for pleural effusions. Okay. In heart?
Pericardial effusion.
Pericardial effusion. Yes. Okay. See, these things are very important. You should never miss.
Yes.
Okay. But we cannot examine full system in emergency room like a routine clinical examination. Yes. So you have to have focus. This patient is having CLD.
Yes.
This patient is having altered behavior. So look for any aspiration pneumonia. Look for any pleural effusion. In heart, look for any pericardial effusion. Okay.
So all of the systems were within the normal limits. Okay. The summary, the Kunjunjamma.
So she is having rheumatoid arthritis also.
Yes.
So you have to look for any deformities already present. Deformities in the hand joints. Any deformities are there?
No deformities were found on the hand joints.
What are the deformities commonly seen in rheumatoid arthritis?
Swan neck deformity.
Okay, because distal interphalangeal joint, proximal interphalangeal joint is the most important. This one, so you can develop deformities there. Then set deformity. So all these things can be there. We will discuss in some other class. Okay.
Yes. The summary of the case: a 75-year-old female patient from Perumbavoor who is a known case of chronic liver disease, rheumatoid arthritis, type 2 diabetes mellitus, and systemic hypertension, presented with constipation and altered sensorium since 4 days. There was evidence of abdominal distension which was uniform in nature. On examination, she had icterus, grade 1 clubbing and flapping tremors or asterixis.
Yeah.
The liver was enlarged with a liver span of 15.5 centimeter.
What is asterisk sign?
Asterixis is also known as flapping tremors, which indicates grade 2 hepatic encephalopathy.
Okay. How do you do that?
We have to ask the patient to stretch their arms forward
Like this.
And we can gradually see flapping of the hands falling forwards.
Okay, it goes down, it will
Yes,
never
sir.
come back. Okay.
Yes. The provisional diagnosis of this case is that it is a decompensated liver disease with portal hypertension and ascites.
How do you diagnose portal hypertension clinically?
Portal hypertension clinically, the evidence of splenomegaly,
Okay.
evidence of upper GI bleed, lower GI bleed,
Okay. And engorged vessels in the
engorged
abdomen.
vessels.
Okay.
The diagnosis was decompensated liver disease with portal hypertension and ascites with grade 2 hepatic encephalopathy.
Okay. So this patient has come to emergency room.
Yes, sir.
What are the first priorities?
We have to treat the hepatic encephalopathy.
Before
first.
that any case come to ER,
Airway
altered
breathing.
behavior, do blood sugar. That is very important because this patient can have hypoglycemia. So blood sugar should be done. Then airway, breathing, circulation should be taken care. Then only your next line of investigation or next line of management will come.
Yes.
So you take care is blood sugar, take care is airway, breathing, circulation. So it's stable.
Yes.
Okay. Then next, what is next?
Then we can treat hepatic encephalopathy.
Okay. We know that hepatic encephalopathy, but you should get lab values, no?
Yes, sir.
What lab values you want?
We can ask for the liver function test.
You can ask for an ABG in emergency room, whether acidosis is there or not.
Okay. Because alkalosis can worsen encephalopathy.
Potassium hypokalemia,
can-
alkalosis can be there. In ABG itself, you can get all sodium, potassium, calcium, all these things. Okay, so ask for that. Okay, potassium should be asked, sodium should be asked. Then,
We have to correct the electrolyte imbalance first.
if it is there, you have to correct it.
Yes.
Okay, if hypokalemia is there, you have to correct it. Hyponatremia is there. Sometimes it can be dilutional hyponatremia. Sometimes it may be real hyponatremia. So, depending on the clinical scenario, you have to correct that. Okay, then what? Now, how do you treat this patient who developed hepatic encephalopathy only because of constipation?
Yeah. First, we can relieve the constipation by giving the patient a syrup lactulose.
What is lactulose?
Lactulose helps in movement of the bowel.
It will not increase the movement of the bowel. It softens the stool. It absorbs more water. It reduces the pH of the intestine. Since it reduces the pH, it can avoid the bacterial growth.
Yes.
These are the actions. Okay, never increases the
motility.
motility. Okay, motility improvement, you have to give something else. Here, do you expect any motility disorder? He's a chronic diabetic patient. He can have reduced motility.
Hypokalemia.
Autonomic dysfunction can be there. Hyperkalemia can be there.
Muscle
Autonomic dysfunction in diabetes is one of the major cause for decreased motility, constipation, all these things. So that if it is there, we have to treat. We have to give metoclopramide or domperidone something. Okay, but main drug is lactulose.
Lactulose.
Okay, so you are given lactulose, but it takes some time to act. What else you can give?
We can give a retention enema as well.
You can give lactulose retention enema. That is very fast. You can get result very fast. Okay, that should be given.
Then we can give an antibiotic.
What antibiotic?
Antibiotic of choice for hepatic encephalopathy is rifaximin.
Okay, rifaximin is both are this lactulose and rifaximin are non-absorbable type of antibiotics. So that can be given.
Rifaximin can be given in the dose of 500 mg twice daily or 400 mg thrice daily.
But this patient is slightly sick. You are admitting the patient. You are given rifaximin, that's okay. Sometimes this patient can have SBP also.
SBP.
What other antibiotic you can?
In the setting of an SBP, we can give ceftriaxone 1 gram IV stat.
You give third generation cephalosporin. Ceftriaxone means a single drug. We are giving third generation cephalosporin. It can be ceftriaxone. It can be some other third generation cephalosporin. Anything is okay because that mainly covers
both gram negative and gram positive.
Mainly covers gram negative organism because we are treating mainly gram negative organism. Whatever is in the stomach or in the ascitic fluid, it's gram 85 to 90% is gram negative. So you give ceftriaxone. That is the main drug. Or like you told, rifaximin can be given.
And rifaximin is gut specific.
Gut specific. Okay. Then what next drug?
For arousal, flumazenil can also help arousal.
That can be given, but not. If you correct all these things, some patients may improve very fast. if like patient is having ascites, is there?
Ascites, we can give furosemide 40 mg.
But what is a side effect of furosemide in hepatic encephalopathy?
Constipation aggravate.
No, it increases the hypokalemia. That means hypokalemia increases. So what happens to the consciousness? Again he'll deteriorate. So what drug should be added to Lasix or furosemide? It is spironolactone. Spironolactone is the main drug. It's a potassium sparing diuretic. What is the other action of spironolactone? It's an aldosterone antagonist.
Yes.
What is the state of aldosterone axis in CLD?
There is secondary hyperaldosteronism.
So secondary hyperaldosteronism is a major problem in the liver disease that produces fluid retention.
Yes.
So you have to give a aldosterone antagonist which prevents potassium loss along with a diuretic, that is Lasix or furosemide. So furosemide with spironolactone is a good choice.
Yes.
What else? What are the drugs you are not supposed to give in this patient? What is the diet you are not supposed to give?
Diet, we can tell the patient to
the patient is admitted in emergency room. Patient is not. We cannot tell them. We have to give it.
We have to avoid protein-rich diets.
You have to avoid protein-rich diet, especially animal protein. Okay. Once the patient improves, we can start plant protein. Okay. So protein-restricted diet should be given in the initial phases. Then salt. There is no hyponatremia. Salt should be restricted. Restricted means what? Restricted salt means what?
Reduced salt intake.
Normal salt. You should advise the patient to take only a normal salt. There is no added salt. Suppose the patient is having hyponatremia, then you have to give more salt.
Yes.
Okay. Real hyponatremia, not dilutional. Dilution is one of the common problem in ascitic patients. So in that case, you no need to correct the salt itself. You can tell the patient to take normal salt. But if the patient is having more water retention, then you have to restrict the salt. You have to ask the patient to reduce the amount of salt intake. Water intake?
Water intake we have to restrict because that can worsen the ascites.
Okay. Since this patient we don't know what is the fluid status, initially we may give fluids, but once we are discharging the patient, we have to restrict the fluid intake to 1 to 1.2 liters if the patient is having ascites and peripheral edema. Okay. Then any drug should be avoided when you are admitting the patient?
We can avoid the drugs which are causing hepatic, like can aggravate encephalopathy.
What are the drugs we should avoid? That is very important for an MBBS doctor. It is very important because you are admitting the patient. He will tell, I have pain in the leg because of some reason like Charcot joint and all.
NSAID.
NSAID should be avoided. You should never give NSAID in a CLD patient. Now this patient is, in ICU will become agitated. Should we avoid some drugs?
We can avoid.
We should avoid diazepam like drugs. Okay. What is the problem of diazepam?
We can make the patient more drowsy.
Okay. So this patient, if you give diazepam for agitation, patient will become unconscious for many days. So you should avoid such drugs. So NSAID should be avoided and benzodiazepine should be avoided. Okay. That you have to take care. Okay. On discharge, what do you advise for this patient? What advice you should give to the patient?
You have to advise the patient for a low protein diet.
Okay.
Water restriction.
Okay.
Salt restriction.
Okay.
Or normal salt intake.
Okay.
And alcohol.
Alcohol should be avoided. Then lactose we have to give continuously. We have to give because already he has developed one episode of constipation. Lactose should be given. Prokinetic should be added because he is a diabetic patient. Prokinetic should be added. What else you can give to prevent the constipation?
High fiber.
High fiber. This is very important. You should never forget to give high fiber diet. Okay. You are giving lactose, but lactose alone will not help in patients like this. You have to give high fiber diet. Okay.
Okay.
Anything else you want to add? This patient is discharged?
If the patient complains of any GI bleeding, she should report immediately because it can lead to hypertension and such complications.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.